Why, hello, my good friends. Welcome,
Hi, everybody,
to DnDTime Talks. I'm your host, Jeremy.
What a coincidence. I'm your host, Pete.
Well,
I didn't mute Twitch.
Welcome, everyone. I hope you're having a great Wednesday day, if it's Wednesday where you are. Pete, how are you?
I'm pretty good, Jeremy. I'm excited to talk about D&D time. This will be our most self-indulgent D&D time talks yet, as we talk about D&D time.
But Pete, we're never self-indulgent. We didn't literally name our Twitch show after ourselves. That would be ridiculous.
I'm pretty sure that you're right. Actually, I'm positive you're right, Jeremy.
Yeah, no, we're not self-indulgent.
So yeah, today's topic is we're going to be talking about the land of D&D time over the next, hour. We're going to be talking about not just, the lore, but also some of the kind of behind the scenes about why we made things and how we made things, how we came up with them. And it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it should. Yeah, you're right. I saw it go here in the chat. We're double booking hosts. How unprofessional. Pete, I'm sorry to do this, but I'm fired.
Shit.
See you later. Bye,
Jeremy,
guys.
That means I run the show now. Wait, Jeremy, you're hired.
I'm back! Whoa!
Welcome back.
Crazy.
It's great. These are the kind of twists and turns you can expect here on DnDTime Talks. The emotional roller coaster that is this talk show. So yeah, if you got any... Oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
I was going to say, before we jump into the normal spiel and start talking about what we're going to do today, just a couple of quick announcements. In the upcoming weeks, hopefully we should be seeing some more kind of casual streams coming out. I know I, for one, will be getting a car soon, which will make my availability a lot better for D&D time. And a bunch of other good stuff's going to be happening. Additionally, This Sunday, I think Pete and I are going to be doing a D&D time brews again, not a delve. We're going back to the delves the week after. We have some lack of availability kind of messing that one up. So
we'll be finishing up. We'll be finishing up the brew that we started last time. So be sure to tune in.
Or we talk about something new. Who knows? We'll see. We can talk about that a little bit more.
Okay. Well, either way. What was the other thing I want to say? Oh, this is an announcement. We'll make this announcement again probably on Friday, but we haven't talked about this at all. So we can probably start mentioning this on stream. Not this upcoming week, but the week after is going to be Player DM Swap Day, where on Pete and Jeremy's D&D team on Friday, a bunch of our players are going to be DMing for me and Jeremy, who I believe, don't hold me to this because could change, but I believe that we will be playing as Bartholomew and Roger in whatever adventures they have cooked up. We're both excited to see what it is, but there will not be a normal D&D time sign up that week. So just wanted to let you all know now. And like I said, we'll announce it again on Friday. And
yes, that is just upcoming next week. So the 25th.
25th.
This Friday, we're going to be doing D-Time as usual. So make sure if you're interested in playing, get your sign-ins in now. Without further ado, Pete, today we're talking about the lands of D&D time. What insanities have traveled through our minds to concoct such a fantastical, whimsical place and all that other good stuff?
Who knows? Who knows what insanity has gone through our brain to create the thing that we did, but we did do it. So yeah, we're going to be going over it. Like I said, we're going to be talking about some of the lore, the regions, the characters, how we came up with them, but kind of the reason we wanted to do this is, well, for one thing, we always wanted to do this on Talks is kind of have a lore episode where we just talk about the world. Also, last week, a community member, I believe it was Ian Grimm, if I'm mistaken, I'm wrong if you're here, Ian Grimm, this was as a result of your suggestion, but he requested that we run through the important places and locations for a way for a lot of the players who are newer to our community to get a better idea of what the world is like, which we're going to do today, but we also think this talk's going to serve a bit of a dual purpose. We're going to talk about how we made a lot of the creative choices that we did and why we made them, and how we've tried to make the world kind of feel alive and cohesive and the little things that kind of bring D&D time to life. So it's also going to be a kind of a tiny bit of a world building episode, although I'm sure we'll do a world building episode proper at some point.
Yeah. So if you're interested in learning at all about DnDTime, if you have characters you want to play, if you just want to learn about the world, this is for you, y'all. We're going to talk about a bunch of the various kingdoms and lands throughout the lands of DnDTime, and hopefully maybe it'll inspire you to play some cool new characters. Or maybe it'll be like, wow, they've pulled back the veil. This is dumb.
Looking at it in its entirety, what is this monstrosity?
So, as a bit of a preface, Pete and I cumulatively have spent thousands of hours on Pete and Jeremy's D&D time.
It must.
It's just absurd amounts of stuff. Just not, there's, of course, everything on the stream that we do, but there's also a whole lot of stuff that goes on off stream, whether it be in planning the game or setting up the website and the Discord server and keeping everything running. There's a lot that goes on. Basically, we spend a massive amount of time working on DnDTime in some degree. The land of DnDTime is a large portion of that. Parts of this world have had a very, very careful hand in developing that I think a lot of you may not quite realize. There is some nuance to what we're doing, just a little bit here and there. We sprinkle it on like some nice flavoring. We don't want to drown you in nuance, but we're going to talk about all the different regions in DnDTime that we remembered. And keyword is that we remembered. We're going to talk about a little bit where they started, our kind of initial concepts, their conception, how we developed them over time, and inevitably what they've evolved into that exist in today's game, in today's world. So, the best part to really start talking about is Bartholomew's Shop, the kind of the world with which the universe of DnDTime revolves. So, Pete, if you want to bring us in with Bartholomew's Shop.
Yeah, let's talk about Bartholomew's Shop a bit. So, as a brief overview of what Bartholomew's Shop is for anyone who's completely unfamiliar with Pete and Jeremy's DnDTime, this is kind of the core crux of our world. When me and Jeremy first started thinking about what we want to do, we were like, oh, we want to run a stream, but we want to do a bunch of one-shots, and we want to do the one-shots with the viewers. Bartholomew's Shop was like, we need a touchstone. We need one thing that we can wrap everything up in that will kind of define the adventure. So we came up with this shop. And basically, it's just this old kind of grouchy wizard named Bartholomew and his intern Roger that run this shop, and they are the quest givers of DnDTime. They give out all of the adventures. They tell you where you're going to go and what you're going to do, and then they reward you for completing these quests in Bartholomew's proprietary currency, Bartholomew Bucks, which he hands out and is only valid within Bartholomew's Shop. Does not pay in gold. It's kind of a vicious cycle that he catches the adventurers here up in. But that design choice, like we said, that was not just like we liked the idea of Bartholomew's Shop. That was like a defining choice because we wanted to do this format where we could be creative and build whatever we wanted throughout the rest of the world. And we needed something that was just an easy kind of catch-all for, yes, you are adventurers, you work for this wizard, he's told you to do this, go and do it.
You need this one reasonable touchstone that you can relate to in order to be able to do crazy things. If you just do craziness, you end up with a jumble that people don't really understand. A great example is like Alice in Wonderland, right? You look at the crazy things that Lewis Carroll comes up with throughout that, yet the touchstone is Alice and her kind of perspective. And our, albeit not quite so nuanced or impressive, our touchstone is Bartholomew.
Bartholomew himself was actually a shopkeeper that I was running in a game with Jeremy and some of our friends from school. And we picked Bartholomew as the character who he is because he's a very powerful wizard and I knew how to do the voice really well. And one of the other great things about Bartholomew is that he's extremely rigid and lawful and does not allow haggling of any kind, which was also important to keep the game fair for everyone. I think when we first started, a few people were frustrated that they couldn't negotiate with Bartholomew, but that's more of a feature than kind of us railroading in the DM department because we wanted to make sure that that's always consistent across all players, that everyone has to pay the same for magic items and for, whatever healing potions and things that he has at this shop. And Jeremy, do you want to talk a little bit about Roger?
Yeah, Roger was a fairly late addition to the Land of D&D Time. Behind the scenes, he has a bit of a bigger kind of purpose that I'm sure will be unveiled in time. But really, he just serves as the other shopkeeper. He doesn't show up very often. He's a gnome. He's Bartholomew's assistant, but he seems to be a little more down to earth than Bartholomew in most. Basically, he's when I need to run the shop. Then you get to hear Roger's voice, which is pretty much just this. Oh my goodness! Just kind of my default gnome voice. I don't know. This is what I think of when I think of gnomes.
Yeah, your gnomes are a little bit more kind of like, you got that more stuffed up nose vibe that I get.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know. This is just what I think.
Mine are a little bit squeakier. Yours got that kind of nasally tone.
Yeah, no, they're stuffed up because they're shrunken so small. It makes their nose shrink.
That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, Bartholomew and Roger.
Please.
I was gonna say Bartholomew and Roger run the shop, and they are kind of the keystone around which D&D Time is built. One of the other kind of defining things about Bartholomew's shop is Bartholomew's Big Bag Bonanza, which was another thing that was actually ripped straight out of that home game that we were playing. But Bartholomew's Bag has gone through iterations and iterations, lots of more iterations than even some of the people who've been here since the beginning would think of us changing it like behind the scenes without telling you what we were doing to it. But basically what it is a huge bag full of presumably infinite magic items, all of them whimsical and goofy. Things like a half a dozen eggs that when you crack them, wild magic surges happen, and things like a shield that folds out into a table so you can sit down and enjoy a delicious kind of meal. And it's all just really...
It's lemonade, Pete. It's lemonade. The current version gives lemonade. Yeah,
the current version
lemonade or beer. I think you get to choose. Or water even. Yeah, you get to choose between 3 different things. Sorry, go ahead.
I did not know I did not know the table shield was that specific. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice memory, Jeremy. Damn. But yeah, it's all this kind of goofy stuff that we picked because we wanted to we wanted the items to kind of reflect the world. We wanted people to get just goofy stuff that maybe they can find something to do with it. It was never kind of about like the power gaming side of things, but more just like the whimsical kind of nature of the game. And also it's important that there's like a legitimate power progression and reward system to like make the game feel satisfying to play.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. There are powerful items within Bartholomew's Big Bag Bonanza.
Oh yeah.
But even the most powerful items. Even the most powerful will have whimsy, kind of goofy things attached to them. And that's intentionally to try and make our players think outside the box. It gives you something that your items do something completely outside of the normal reality of Dungeons and Dragons, most of them. And so we really love that because it lets you be as creative or, as mundane as you want. At the very least, the table shield, it folds out and you have a nice table to stand on. But you could use that in more creative ways too. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I'm certain they exist.
Yes, but you guys can. Well, here's a good example. As opposed to like putting a +1 shield in the bag, different than the table shield. We have a shield. I think, is it just called the wall shield, where they put out the shield and then just a giant wall spawns in front of it that just becomes like a piece of the terrain. So now you have this wall to work with, which you can do a ton of creative stuff with it. And I think it's Crowley who owns it, and he's done a ton of creative stuff with it, like jumping up and then dropping a wall on someone from above. Like, there's a lot of stuff, and that's kind of the design philosophy on our items. And also there's tons of player built items because we do that. If you're interested in building items for D&D Time, there's information on how to do that on the website. Quick plug. So yeah, I think that's enough on Bartholomew's shop. Yeah,
it's interesting. I can't reach DnDTime.stream right now.
That's weird.
That's new.
But yeah, so like we always kind of say this in the intro. Okay, good. We always kind of say this in the intro. Like Bartholomew and Roger are the glue that holds D&D time together. But what is it that they're holding together? So there are a whole bunch of like major regions in D&D time that we always kind of jump around to back and forth between. So let's start diving into those. I had the dump on here first, but want to do Big Rock Candy Mountains first because I've been talking for a while.
Yeah, sure. I'll the Big Rock Candy Mountains first. So one of the, by the way, just as a quick clarification, the table shield can summon you glasses of ice cold non-magical lemonade. I was incorrect. No. It does not provide ale or any other drink. I'm sorry.
Non-magical specified because there's an important item that gives magical lemonade.
Magical lemonade. But anyway, yeah, I'll talk about the first place that we're going to speak about today, the Big Rock Candy Mountains. To those of you who may be familiar with the Big Rock Candy Mountains, they're one of the more popular locations in the land of time, at least amongst the community. Essentially, my kind of thought was, well, I'll tell you what they are right now, and then we'll go a little more details to where they come from. Big Rock Candy Mountains are a massive, gargantuan mountain range. They are the northernmost border of the land of D&D time. They are utterly inhospitable to live in. They are an incredibly brutal environment. And they are kind of characterized by the fact that everything is made of candy. Boulders are just giant blocks of chocolate. Trees tend to be made of candy cane with leaves made of cotton candy. And ice cream falls from the sky. Notably
delicious,
flavorless, right? Ice cream.
Yeah.
That was... Anyway, so we'll talk a little about the origin here. Obviously, it comes from the song Big Rock Candy Mountain. I don't know if that's the name of the song, but there's a song
I believe it is.
In the Big Rock Candy Mountain.
Rock Candy Mountain.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different stuff. That's where the original kind of conception came from. And that song is actually like a brutal song. If you listen to like a lot of the words in it, there's some harsh stuff in there. There's also some like happy-go-lucky, life is going to be good stuff, but there's some brutal stuff in there. And with that, I wanted that juxtaposition of the Big Rock Candy Mountains between the brutality of the environment with, well, everything's made of candy. So yeah, whimsical but surprisingly harsh is kind of the idea we're kind of going for with it. The players have decided, and this happened very early on, when a group of players decided they wanted to play lizard folk that were all from the Big Rock Candy Mountains, which was excellent. And so as a result of that, these lizard folk have kind of become a theme with it, where there's a high lizard folk population that worship the clouds, which drop the candy from the skies. They drop the ice cream from the skies. And as a kind of player choice, the flavorless ice cream which falls, they have decided they can taste as they worship this god, this great ice cream, this great candy cloud. A spin-off of Uchanka's Uaopli, Farfel in chat, his great big cloud. We'll talk more about that later when we talk about religions a little bit. But yeah, basically the players have kind of rolled with that and ran with it a little bit. There's the Great Kool-Aid Lake up in the Big Rock Candy Mountains, which was created by Mr. Plunderloot in chat. And a lot of really cool things. If we decide basically ever that we want to have that kind of dark, whimsy flavor, the Big Rock Candy Mountains are a good place to do it. One of the kind of key enemies that has shown up from time to time in the Big Rock Candy Mountains are the Ice Grumps, which I just came up with that name because I thought it sounded dumb.
It's a good name.
That was the reason.
I can I can kind of tell what an ice grump is too. I can tell it's Yeti-ish.
Yeah, they're basically just a big, abominable Yeti. They have their mouth on their chest instead of on their head. Think of what's the red guy from Real Monsters? Really dating you if you know what that is.
Oh, I could not remember his name, but I know the guy you're talking about.
His eyes are on his chest. The eyes are on the chest instead of his hands, and he's covered in fur, and he's got big claws, and he eats people. That's actually a really apt description of what I want the ice grump to look like. Anyway. That's a common monster. It freezes people just by hearing them. A kind of twist of mine on normal petrification. And yeah, it eats them when they are all frozen into ice. So the Big Rock Candy Mountains are pretty neat like that. I mean, there are a few other cool places I'm really interested in going into there. Like there's a large frozen ice castle up there.
I was going to ask you about that ice castle. That's in the
yeah.
future?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It is the known source of the Sugar Rush zombies.
Sugar Rush zombies,
which
yes.
The idea of Sugar Rush zombies they are just people who have eaten so much of the candy in the Big Rock Candy Mountains that they have gone completely insane, overcome by their desire to consume. All of their teeth are rotted out, so they just smack you with their face a lot.
Infinite tacos in chat. Ickis is the red one with big ears. Damn.
Ickis, you're right. Oh, Infinite tacos. I knew you'd have me. Oh yeah.
Real monsters.
Throwback. Yeah, exactly. Y'all know me. You're my kind of people.
Absolute snipe.
Anyway. Yeah, that's basically the big gist of the Big Rock Candy Mountains. There's one NPC that's really been established there, who I haven't come back to in a while, but I plan to soon. His name is Asbjorn. He's a friendly frost giant who lives up in the Candy Mountains. And he rides upon his dire moose, Matilda, and is sworn to defeat the Sugar Rush zombies, which that all ties back into that big ice castle I mentioned earlier, which will happen in a future episode. We kind of get to the bottom of that.
Ooh, mysterious.
But yeah, basically, if you like
can you do the Asbjorn voice for us one time, Jeremy?
No, I'm not going to do it right now.
Why,
hello, it's I, Asbjorn.
I knew you would.
There we go. Wait, no, that's not quite right. Okay, there we go. It's kind of like a bad Swedish accent. Yeah, it's very bad. Not quite right.
It's a very good. I love that one.
Anywho, if you want to play a character that's like has like cool candy themes, like a lot of those players you were talking about who made their lizard folk in Big Rock Candy Mountains, all of their weapons are like candy themed. Like Sugar Mama is one you probably know recently from her boss battle. She's got her big lollipop kind of mace thing. Yes, she did it before, Jester. Thank you very much. And another one, Papa Sickle with his big candy morning star and hard candy morning star. And all these
Gummy and Sweet Tooth.
Yeah, Gummy and Sweet Tooth we can't forget either, although we haven't seen them quite in a while. But I'm sure they'll come back soon enough. If you want to have cool, like goofy candy themed stuff, Big Rock Candy Mountains is great for that. It's just cool.
Yeah.
And of course, don't forget King Milton Bradley of the Candy Kingdom. But that's
yes. as of yet on. Wait, did we ever do anything with King Milton? Yes, we did do.
Yeah. He was in the Myth boss battle, Pete.
Yes, of course. I forgot that he was the setup for that.
I think it's probably enough of me rambling on about the Big Rock Candy Mountains.
Yes.
You get the idea. Everything's made of candy.
So in that case, let me ramble on about the dump for a while. Yeah. The dump was like the first region we ever introduced into the land of DnDTime that became one of like the big places that we know now. But it's, by the name, it's the dump. It is just a huge dump full of mounds of junk and garbage, like roll over, just kind of, it's like a really hot and barren kind of region otherwise, but just mounds of garbage roll over them, just like kind of like sweet hills. It smells very badly. And that's the dump. And there are a ton of like sub-regions and kind of characters and almost like factions that are within the dump. But before we get into that, a little bit about where it came from, actually. It started out with a character called the Trash King. The Trash King is the kind of the mysterious ruler of the Trash Kingdom. He's a character I play as. His catchphrase is just his name, basically, which is, "I am the Trash King," which he says all the time. You know, he wears a cape of like old newspapers, a crown of bottle caps and rusty silverware that's all kind of like strung together. And he kind of believes that everything there is his domain, and he demands that everyone who comes there, you know, they treat him with respect, and sometimes they require, you know, Bartholomew's adventurers to pay him like a tribute in trash in order to enter his kingdom or something along those lines. So this character, he came from actually a day when I was at work, and I had to like dump a bunch of trash, essentially a bunch of compost into these barrels. I had 4 different barrels around me making like a cage for myself. And one of my coworkers walked by and he was like, "Hey, what's going on, Pete?" And I just yelled back at him. I was just like, "You cannot enter my kingdom of garbage." And he was like, "I don't want to." And I was like, "Okay." And he walked by and I was like, "Wait, come back." And he's like, "Yeah." And I was just like, you cannot enter my kingdom of garbage. I am the Trash King. I made up this character called the Trash King, which I was for a while, the Trash King. And so, yeah, that's how the Trash Kingdom came about, is because of that dumb joke I told that one time, which is, I think, it's going to be it's going to be kind of a recurring theme that you find with a lot of our major world building points. But yeah, so the dump and the Candy Mountains, both of them, they're really kind of like what the heart of what we wanted this world to be like, is just lots of really kind of goofy stuff. You know, and it's kind of juxtaposed by taking itself so seriously. Like, the Trash Kingdom kind of has this undercurrent of being a real sort of political story of this weird Trash King who's kind of improving his control over the region that he claims is his, as the dump, through all of the adventures that he has people do within it. And he's usually he's usually the person that you're working for if you're in the dump. Kind of the in-world reason that the dump exists, and this is part of how we've been trying to slowly kind of weave everything together. We'll talk about the cult of the Green Sun a little bit later, but basically this group of wizards that run municipalities in DnDTime, the cult of the Green Sun, rather than burn the trash or recycle it, they just teleport it all to the center of DnDTime, where this big massive pile of trash has slowly built up and is getting larger and larger and larger over time, so much so that, you know, people now live there, and they kind of have to because it takes up so much space. So, you know, everything within the dump, all the things that happen, they're all kind of based around trash and different like types of trash and the way it's sorted. But it's set up kind of like a kingdom, but it's kind of its own kind of small world unto its own. There's all these like smaller regions. There's the scrap metal mountain. There's the compost commune. There's the alchemical wasteland, the sea of broken glass. Jeremy, that's one of yours, the sea of broken glass.
I came up with that one.
There's the slopes of sewage is probably the least pleasant of them, and you know there's like a bunch more. But yeah, that's kind of a general idea of what the dump is. But the thing I really love about it is it has this kind of weird political story of this strange Trash King slowly like reigning in his kingdom and getting more control. Like in a recent adventure, we introduced the Junk Knights, which are the Trash King's knights. That's how he kind of like maintains order in his Trash Kingdom. And they're these people that just build themselves like armor and strange contraptions out of all the junk that's around them, and you know, use that as weapons. And so yeah, that's the dump.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it briefly with the Big Rock Candy Mountains, but I'll mention it again here. With the Big Rock Candy Mountains and the dump, there are some really core themes that we really hit on here. In the dump, it is garbage, and then the juxtaposition is political, like nuance. So we have these intentional kind of counteracting themes within the same place to really try and give it a little more feel. With the Big Rock Candy Mountains, it is candy, sugar and spice, everything nice, and brutal, hostile worlds with incredibly, you know, unkind creatures. And so this is kind of an intentional choice we have to kind of give us a little bit more to work with and make it a little more interesting for ourselves. Yeah,
I just think it makes it a more interesting story if there's more to it than just, oh, well, this is... A setting can be like something that comes to life, or it can just be kind of window dressing. And if I'm being honest, we have some of the places where it's just the setting is just kind of where things happen, that don't have as much of a direct impact on the story of the world. But I think the dump and the Big Rock Candy Mountain do that the best of our kind of the places that we have.
Yeah, you'll notice the places we visit the most are the places that have these more engaging, right, unique themes.
Yes.
And so, Pete, do you want to talk about Central City, or do you want me to take one now?
I can talk a bit about Central City. I mean, we both have some stuff I think that we can go on about in Central City, although I spend a bit more time there. So yeah, why don't you start it off, Jeremy, actually?
So Central City in today's DnDTime is the massive, sprawling center of the world's DnDTime. It's filled with large buildings, almost skyscrapers for a medieval era. It has some degree of electrical power and even motorized carts. It's pretty interesting, but it has nothing to do with the Flash, despite the name Central City. This metropolis was originally part of something a little greater, and that it had more of a reason to its name than just Central City. And that has to do with the other towns around it. Originally, Pete had come up with a city and called it the capital of the Kingdom of Compass. Being Central City, it was the center of the compass, kind of flanked on all sides by North Town, South Town, East Town, and West Town. You want to talk about those a little, Pete?
Yeah, so the directional towns was something that I had originally planned to actually do quite a bit with, but I never really just had time because there's so many to really utilize all of them. The only one that I've really spent a lot of time in is Southtown. But the overarching idea was that Central City was the hub in which all of these other towns kind of mixed, but on the outlying towns, they were based on alignment. So North and South were good and evil, respectively, and then East and West were chaos and law, respectively. It was set up kind of like those classic alignment charts that you see. And each town was meant to kind of represent their alignment, both in the people that lived there and even just the structure of the buildings and the way things looked within the town, and just kind of the prevailing attitude. So, I mean, we went to West Town, for example, and all of the buildings were perfectly regimented. Every building was kind of the same. There was a very strong legal system. Everyone had to, live by very specific rules, and everyone obeyed those rules, as opposed to I'm sorry, I said East Town, I meant to say West Town, as opposed to East Town, which was just an absolute jumble where all of the houses were like stacked on top of each other, too far apart, too close together. The people, just fights breaking out in the street. So that was kind of the idea. And firework dragons. And so, each town I think has had at least one chance to showcase itself, but the one that I've spent the most time with really is Southtown, the evil town, because that is the home of a character that I really love. That is Philip Q. Janglebones, undead detective, or really he's Philip Q. Janglebones, attorney at law, or Dr. Philip Q. Janglebones, MD. Basically, he is a skeleton that is not really controlled by anyone. From kind of what is known about Philip Q. Janglebones at the moment, he's just kind of his own weird thing, and he goes around and solves undead crime, which is all over the place in Southtown. Is that it's kind of the evil around town, and there's ghosts and all kinds of spooky stuff everywhere in that town. So that's really the one that we've had the most with. But those are the directional towns.
Yeah, you've noticed, like Pete was saying, he spends most of the time in Southtown. For the most part, we've relegated those outer towns to a minimal kind of environment, and basically Central City, while not having quite the nuance of some of the of like the Big Rock Candy Mountain or the Dump, it is kind of just our metropolitan center. If we need a city to run an adventure in, it's going to be in Central City. So you're going to find a lot of the Cult of the Green Sun adventures there, and you're going to find the Central City Zoo there. The Central City Zoo is a thing of my own creation. I decided to just stick a zoo in the middle of Central City because I thought it'd be hilarious to have a monster park in a fantasy land like any Dungeons and Dragons world. There are all sorts of really interesting things. I take a lot of time to kind of describe, when people visit the zoo, the basilisk exhibit with the statues all around it of zoo goers.
Yeah, I love that one. And the mimics.
The mimic exhibit, which just looks like a very, very nice dining room behind a glass.
Very beautifully furnished room.
Excellently furnished, roaring
Such
fire,
a good joke.
Nice carpets and chairs and everything. And it's always something silly going on. Sometimes it has to do with the animals there. One of my personal favorite episodes, although I know it wasn't maybe not the best. I had the owl bear breeding program where you had to. Oh
yes, that was a very good one.
You had to play the owl bear dating game. I really liked that one a lot. And yeah, I have a bunch of cool ideas for the Central City Zoo. However, right now it's in a bit of a period of turmoil, as the kind of the zookeeper, whose name was Safari Jack, who had an incredibly racist Australian accent, was brutally slain by a certain Dandere ninja. Specifically, I believe that was on Chiron or Siren. Correct me if I'm wrong there. Thank you, I see Reflecting Today, for the 100 bits of cheer. Give it 100 bits for the Owlbear dating game. I love Owlbear.
That's a great adventure.
My first concept when we were talking about DnDTime, I wanted all of my adventures to revolve around Owlbears. that hasn't happened at all. Anyway, so you'll expect
like in the first couple, I think.
Yeah, expect me seeing some new stuff about the Central City Zoo soon, as it now kind of is in that stage of evolving, right? Where the new zoo post its kind of key NPC is going to be a little more interesting. Has a card holder and it bites people's fingers off.
So yeah, a couple more things in Central City that are pretty important to me personally that I've spent a lot of time with. There are the Morts. The Morts are the criminal organization, the kind of the one really significant major criminal organization that we've established here in D&D time. And what they are this kind of balding, middle-aged dude named Mort, wears kind of, white, dirty t-shirt, stomach hangs out of it a bit, just kind of like regular pants, very gruff. He kind of talks like this. This is the Mort voice. You say a few extra swears, you drop in the occasional shit or fuck, and then you're kind of doing Mort. And the thing is when I say that Mort is the organization, every single member of the organization is identical in appearance. It's how they get away with things, because the laws of Central City are a jumble, and it's easy for them to get out of crimes by saying, "Oh, it's committed by a different Mort. That's not me. Do I look like a criminal to you?" And they're basically all members of this crime syndicate, but they have slowly been evolving over time. Where they started out, they were just kind of these people that wore earrings to all look the same, like this one person that changed their voices. But they've been developing things like diseases to make people actually contract Mort, like a syndrome, turning individuals into Morts, so that it's a much harder to tell whether or not they are the real one. So no one knows who the real one is. And also there's half Morts where they don't have the personality of the other Morts, but they have the appearance. So it makes it harder to pick out which one's the bad ones, because they're not all bad. And they're just trying to make everyone a Mort so they can get away with more crime.
Mort crime?
They're trying to get away with Mort crime. And they kind of came from a funny statement I once heard called, where someone said, "Mort's mortuary, you stab him, we slab him." I was like, cool, I'll use that for the mortuary. But then I was like, what if every criminal thing in the town is a Mort? And so I could just come up with different ones. And then it was just well, I guess there's just a million Morts. So that's how that one came about.
And that one's super cool, right? Because if we ever want to do any sort of crime investigation, Morts are just an awesome plot to foil that we can kind of run with. And especially in Central City, where they may have machine guns or something, you can do that silly, ridiculous stuff.
Very really kind of cool. 20s. It's very much the 20s in Central City.
Another thing about Central City is the mayor of Central City, and without going into too much detail, the current mayor is named Dorothy Parker. She loves being the mayor. She loves herself a lot.
Yes, she's very proud of the fact that she's the mayor.
She likes declaring holidays for adventurers who do good things, naming city heroes, and all sorts, and walking the streets, of course, to speak with her constituents. One of the interesting things about the mayor of Central
politics
City
of Central City
is one time afterwards, I named someone else the mayor of Central City. After Pete had already established the mayor of Central City, and people were like, "Jeremy, I thought Dorothy Parker was the mayor of Central City." And the answer is, yeah, of course. Once you're the mayor of Central City, you're the mayor of Central City forever. It's like the president of the United States. You're always Mr. President, even once your office is. So everyone's the mayor. There's a lot of mayors.
Yeah, because
there's only one important mayor.
It's imagine the president of the United States, but it's there are people like elves that live for 500 years. So
exactly.
So there's just tons of mayors walking around.
Yeah, lots of mayors in Central City.
I like to think that, there's a percentage of the population are mayors, low key.
It's above 1%.
Yeah, it's more than that. Yeah, a non-trivial percentage of the population. And then the other major thing in Central City is the Green Sun cult, which we talked about if you watched DnDTime Brews. We talked about pretty extensively, but a quick kind of run through of what they are. They're another kind of major sort of evil faction in the land of DnDTime, lawful evil specifically. And they run all of the municipalities, your post office, your power plant, your waste collection. They are the people that send all the trash to the dump. And they're kind of the vibe of it, and I guess this is another kind of contrast thing. They were pretty heavily inspired by. I was listening to a lot of Welcome to Night Vale when we originally started the show, and I was kind of borrowing that kind of aesthetic a bit, where it's mundane things made Lovecraftian horror. So you go to the post office, but it's like this dark hooded figure that works behind the desk of the post office, and like the mailbox itself is this like strange like shifting creature where all of the multitude of mouths on its body are like the mail slots. So it's a terrifying place, and you shouldn't want to go there unless you absolutely have to.
And yeah, that's kind of our outlet for if we want to do Eldritch stuff, for the most part. Rare exception. And generally intentional exceptions. I'm looking at you, Lance. Anyway, without going into that, the next place we're going to talk about really briefly, I think, because we're starting to well, we took a long time on Central City. The Baradak Swamp. Baradak Swamp is a place that I created very early on. It's just a massive, nearly endless swamp. It blights the land of D&D time, and we've kind of, in the very first episode, I think, it was established as a place filled with frogs, and we've kind of gone from there. Home of the Banderhobs, all sorts of other frog people, and more recently, I really love these guys, are the Grung. I love the Grung. And the Baradak is very similarly to the Big Rock Candy Mountains, it's more desolate than brutal. There's just not a lot of life in the Baradak. And so I like this very solemn, just hopeless feeling place to have lots of goofy, just incredibly silly characters. So a great example, like I said, are the Grung in their kingdom of Ribipt, which is just a really bad pun on Egypt, with Pharaoh Froggenhoppen. I think he's on Froggenhoppen the Third now, as Froggenhoppen the Second was killed by Froggenhoppen the Third. So
sounds right.
Yep, Froggenhoppen the First sealed himself inside of his pyramid. So he's, I think, still alive, but trapped. But yeah, it's a goofy, silly place. The frogs will always have a ridiculous, just silly quest for you. Originally, the very first quest was you had to go get a very specific dinosaur's poop for their big feast. Which, in this incredibly desolate, just miserable place, just we have to get a dinosaur's what?
Nothing like a good poop joke.
Nothing like a good poop joke. Yeah, and also, I mean, in the most recent one, they had to go and bring a crocodile back for his crocodile pit. But yeah, there's all sorts of goofy stuff going on there. There's a little bit more we want to go into with the Baradak. For example, when we first kind of came up with it, it was just a big swamp. But over time, we've come up with a little more nuance to it. Like, it was formerly, before it was a swamp, it was a beautiful, glade. It was this fantastic forest that spanned all of the world. And was home to the world tree itself, which
and these are pieces of lore that we really love and are they're really big in me and Jeremy's mind, but sometimes stuff like that just kind of gets a little bit brushed over because it's a set piece more than it is something that people actively interact with. I mentioned that in one adventure ever. I don't know if you ever have, Jeremy, and it was with Julius Frogston, who was the Roman bullywugs.
The
frogs.
The Roman opposites to my Egyptians. I'm waiting, Pete, for you to go back to them so we can have our Cleopatra deal.
I'm going back next week, actually.
Oh, exciting.
Or this week. Okay. Yeah, that was actually, I put it on the list because I was I'm definitely going there this week, so I'll remind everyone that this happened. This was a really long time ago when I ran the first Julius Frogston adventure. And Jeremy, Clinton Slaughter Murder.
Oh yeah, so one of people's favorite NPCs from the Baradak, and probably one of my favorite NPCs.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite.
So name is Clinton Slaughtermurder. He is the chef romancer. He specializes in animating foods and putting people back together after they've been eaten. And my thought with him is, I'm going to give him just this brutal name. I'm going to make him a cultist. He lives in a decrepit tower in the middle of this desolate, awful place. But he's just so friendly. He's just incredibly polite. He's super relaxed. he doesn't want to get into any of the stuff going on in the world except the dating game. You know, that's been a theme with him apparently.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, he's just a fun guy. He's like, oh hey, how's it going? I'm Clinton Slaughtermurder, and it's good to see you guys. He's just chill, and I thought this was a really fun juxtaposition with him, and people have really liked him so far.
A quick note about he's my favorite of your guys, and Clinton Slaughtermurder. Jeremy had this one moment that sold me on this character forever that I want to highlight, and I've told him this before, where two players I think were arguing or asked him what his religion was, where they were kind of arguing about the Cloud versus the Conch and going over that old kind of religious rivalry, which is a community-based holy war almost that started in the land of D&D time. And Jeremy just said, "Oh, I wash my hands of the Cloud Conch debacle," in his Chef Romancer voice. And I just absolutely loved that because, I mean, it makes the world feel so real that there's a person who can just be like, no, I don't want to get involved in any of this stuff. And also, I mean, that's just good improv. Like, it's just so shout out to you, Jeremy, for that great joke that I'll never forget. We're not even a joke, just great improv.
And speaking of the Cloud and Conch, let's talk about the Cloud and Conch. Before we jump on to our next area, let's talk about that. The Great Big Cloud is an important god throughout the land of D&D time. It was originally created by Farfel13 in chat with his character Uchunkus Uwapli, the High Priest.
The High Priest.
The Great Big Cloud is literally just a great big cloud. It is so D&D time, and it provides great thunderous power to its worshippers. It is probably the most popular viewer-created thing
aspect
in D&D time. Yeah. It might be the most popular aspect in D&D time, actually. Maybe not viewer. It might surpass
it might just be
I've done too.
Just the number one thing, as is always the case.
Yeah, it's just cool. It really fits that cool, like, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to be politically correct here. Like tribalistic. God, that's probably not a politically correct word.
Yeah, that's the word that I was thinking too, and I was thinking maybe not. And I mean, you get the idea at least. You've already said it, so we can use it.
Yeah, exactly. Like sort of, I say, not uncivilized. Well, yeah, uncivilized, right? From not a modern area kind of deal.
It feels like I can imagine it being like an ancient god that like cavemen would have like praised the Cloud because they did not understand what else to praise.
Yeah, or people without access to modern like information and science, something like that. Like those lost tribes in the Amazon that every once in a while, like a helicopter will take a picture of. You know what I'm talking about. The other one is the magic. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's the magic conch, right?
The conch,
straight up the magic
usually
conch.
usually just the conch.
And the conch is a kind of aquatic sea folk, like Triton merfolk kind of god, which recently has gotten a little bit more love from its creator in chat, Infinite Tacos.
Infinite Tacos. Great comment.
Nice.
Wow.
Where apparently it is about like cleansing the land and stuff. So it's actually a very brutal god. It is the warmonger god to the Great Big Cloud. But it's also really cool to have a character who just is like, yep, I am totally cool with killing bad things or things that I see bad, or if I decide it's bad, just arbitrarily. And having that kind of will to just roll with it, right? To be that murder hobo character. Or you can give yourself a deeper purpose than that. Yeah, the conch is evil. The conch welcomes all challengers.
All challengers. Yeah.
The conch was actually featured fairly a couple months back in an underwater adventure I ran, which we might get around to, depending. We're going real slow.
Yeah,
here,
we're moving. So. Let's start wailing on some of these regions that aren't quite as solidified as that. Let's do Crimson Coast on the subject, Jeremy.
Yeah, so the Crimson Coast is the easternmost coast land of D&D time. It is our eastern border. A lot of our lands are intended to be like a border. So the coast and the sea to the east, that is the furthest east in the land of D&D time. Generally speaking, if you're going to have an adventure in the Crimson Coast, it's going to be at Buckler's Bay.
Buckler's Bay,
Which is like a kind of Tortuga-esque pirate shanty town.
Yar har fiddle-dee-dee.
Yep. Or it'll be at one of the islands off the coast, or even just on the sea itself. The kind of defining factor about the Crimson Coast is the kind of little red beads of sand that are kind of intermixed there, giving the entire beach a red color, which is something that we very rarely actually think to mention. Bad me.
Every once in a while, I'll mention it, because that was actually just the name of the region. I wanted to put something for an adventure I was running, and then we decided to be like, we'll make this important, and it'll be the whole coast.
Yeah. The thing about the Crimson Coast, as opposed to like the dump that we were talking about earlier, is the Crimson Coast, generally speaking, lacks that kind of nuance. It has some powerful themes like pirates and water adventures, like surfing, like fun themes to play with. But it lacks that more interesting nuance that something like the dump or the
it doesn't have not as much personality, but it's just kind of the water zone.
Yeah, one of the aquatic places that we visited before is the Titanic, which is just a really bad forced pun where 3 giant steamboats crashed into each other, although they all crashed into an iceberg and then sank to the bottom. It's this big pile where the merfolk all made their city. It's a really bad Titanic forced pun, but it's a really cool giant artificial reef, and it's neat.
Yeah, it's kind of the Crimson Coast. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to push because we're getting late.
I know.
I'm gonna whale through the frontier. Not a ton to say about the frontier. It's the westernmost region of D&D time, sort of in contrast to the Crimson Coast. It is a what?
No, Lance. Oh, Lance hit me with a bad one in chat.
Oh god, I saw it. I just saw it. I'm not gonna say it out loud. It's the westernmost region of D&D time. It's like a vast, sprawling desert and wasteland, and the people of D&D time are slowly attempting to settle it. The reason we made it is because we wanted a good place to run those like old Western style showdowns, train heists, and murder mysteries and bandits, and all sorts of other kind of Western inspired adventures that we've done. It's just all the classic Wild West stuff that we wanted to do. We'll be like, well, that's the frontier. Other stuff that's there. There was like Mad Marcus, who was the Spectre, who was like one of the faster, who was like a fast gunman bandit and fired his eye rays off. There's Quick Draw Quentin, who runs away from stuff, is his thing. There's these kind of just these goofy characters, and like kind of with the the Crimson Coast. It's just less nuanced and more just, this is the desert where we want to do Western themed adventures. It's fun to play with, but there's not like a ton to it. Player inspired thing. There's purple worms on the outskirts that keep people from moving farther out. And one other interesting thing I want to touch on, which you haven't seen him too much, but I have some plans for this guy in the long term. One group of players met the Avatar of the Edge out there. And this is a strange figure that seems to be kind of like pushing back against people trying to settle this frontier. And actually at the end of that adventure, this strange kind of like raven-masked figure ended up destroying the town because destroying a town that they were there to save, kind of pushing the borders of D&D time a little bit farther in. And so that's kind of like this strange force that is just kind of on the outskirts of D&D time that's always kind of like pressing in this like weird character, which I haven't spent a lot of time with, but I want to mention him because I got big franchise plans for this guy.
Yeah. And very similarly to the Crimson Coast, the Frontier, while useful for running those kind of games, I love running my train heist games. I've really enjoyed every train heist game I've ran, which I think is 2, but I've really loved both of them. Yeah, it's a great place to run those, but it again lacks that kind of nuance, which is why we don't go back there quite as often. The Sacred Vale is another location that we've recently started spending a little more time in. The idea, it's in the northeast of the land of D&D time, which someday we will get a rough map for y'all. I love the Sacred Vale. It's an idea that was entirely of Pete's creation. And the idea is it's a massive kind of heavily forested area, in between some kind of in this nice little valley where it's home to numerous kind of lesser gods, demigods, and other semi-divine beings like archfey and things like that. The idea and Pete's basic gist for it was originally that gods that were not quite powerful enough, creatures that weren't powerful enough to quite go into the astral sea and live on like Mount Celestia and the other, outer planes, they lived in the Sacred Vale until they got enough power. We've featured all sorts of cool lesser gods, like Sit, the god of chairs.
God of, and goddess, there was Rubble, the god of boulders.
God of boulders. And I had one character show up briefly, Valeran, who is not a god so much, but he's a powerful warlock of fabulosity. He's an archfey.
Yes.
And
on the subject of my favorite of Jeremy's characters, you haven't seen much of Valeran yet, but I absolutely adore him. I've seen more of him than you have.
I also really love Valeran. There will be more Valeran in the future.
For sure.
Also in the Sacred Vale is the Academy of Light and the Academy of Blight. Two kind of schools, literally schools, institutes of learning, some for dark magics like necromancy and warlock stuff and whatever, and the Academy of Light for divine magics like healing and paladins and all of that. It's a really fun kind of place because it allows us to do that, like do silly college adventures.
That like high school prom is like an adventure that I actually ran once, basically. Like, and it has
one of your
Victorious.
Favorites. Yeah, Pete, tell us about Victorious.
I love Victorious. He's one of my favorite guys to be. Victorious is just a paladin. He's like, he's captain of the ball game team, which is national sport of DnDTime. He's kind of this. He was supposed to be a cleric, but learning rituals is hard. So he's a paladin, and his name is Victorious, and he talks kind of like this, and he's a completely righteous dude. Righteous, obviously, is an excellent pun on the fact that he's righteous, and he's also righteous. That's Victorious.
But there are some other places in the land of DnDTime. The Silvered Peaks is another location we actually went back to last week. The Silvered Peaks was another forced pun. I do this sometimes, where it's a bunch of dwarves. They live really up high in the mountains, and they live in the city of Ag, A-G, which is the chemical symbol for silver, hence the Silvered Peaks. There are other dwarven cities that are lost to time that are also up there, where you can explore the ruins in certain adventures, like which is city for gold. It's in the Golden Peaks, and Ku,
nice.
Copper, in the Copper Peaks. In the Silver Peaks, it's always something. I've lacked a lot of super developed themes. I figure in the future I'm going to start taking that more in a more cohesive direction. But the one thing that has really been established about the dwarves so far is they bounce back real easy. The smallest inconvenience sends the city into complete disrepair. They'll set everything on fire. People will just crawl on the ground like it's the apocalypse. And then 20 minutes after the adventurers kill the bad thing, it's like, oh, it's great. We're having parades. Thanks, adventurers. Like nothing ever happened.
Very flexible, those dwarves.
It's fun.
Which is actually funny for dwarves, too.
But yeah, exactly. So maybe I should focus more upon that. I think there's been more than one adventure regarding ale and or beards as well. So, classic dwarf kind of stuff. And then, the adventures are entitled Dwarf Problems, so whatever.
I have the Silvered Peaks Historical Society, which is a tie-in I do when I want to do some kind of dungeon or go to a place, and I want to tie it into the world in some way, but I have no ideas. So it's the dwarves of the Silvered Peaks Historical Society have set out to investigate and clear out this dungeon.
Yeah, and that's really all there is to the Silvered Peaks. The king's a really bad king. That too. He's just a really crappy guy and a bad king. Let's talk about Sokotoa, Pete.
Sokotoa, I love this place. Sokotoa is a city with extremely advanced technology, owned by the Trigonomes. For anyone who's not familiar with Sokotoa, it's what's the word I'm looking for? Acronym. It's just like a mnemonic device to help you remember angles and sine and cosine and tangent and trigonometry. And then naturally, it's run by the Trigonomes. That's where the name came from. And the big thing about the Trigonomes is their rivalry with the Math Goblins. They are these extremely advanced the Trigonomes are these extremely advanced gnomes that create all this technology using their really advanced mathematics skills. All like the tech in Central City comes from the Trigonomes. They're kind of like the mecca. And their rivals are these math goblins, which harness the dark powers of math. They're not as good at math as the Trigonomes, but through what little knowledge they have, they unlock its dark secrets and wield it into powerful magics. These are one of my favorite things. This was like the first adventure I ever thought of for D&D time. Like before D&D time started, I'd fleshed out, what if there were math goblins? And they have like different tiers, like your basic foot soldiers, you got your arithmids, then for your like more powerful casters, you got your geomancers, and then the threat with the math goblins is that someday there may come a calculord, a math goblin who can do calculus, and a math goblin with the power that has the knowledge of how to do calculus could shift that into magic that could reshape the very fabric of reality. So that's why the Trigonomes are always trying to keep the math goblins down, is because they're afraid of that. And that's kind of the whole story of
math goblin.
I absolutely adore this place.
I also really like the math goblins. I don't care too much for the Trigonomes.
Yeah, I agree, actually. The Trigonomes are just kind of the foil to the math goblins.
But another interesting character in Sokotoa is Winsler Bubble Books, who runs the library there, which is, he's the one kind of malcontent, not fitting in kind of gnome. Trigonome.
Yes, he studies the liberal arts.
Yeah, he studies liberal arts. He's really into like words and grammar and stuff.
Yeah,
I really love Winsler.
Yeah, I do too. All. Yeah, he runs a library. Go check out the library sometime if you get a chance. Plane of Dreams?
Yeah, let's briefly talk about the Plane of Dreams, and then so the Plane of Dreams is a place where we can just do anything. The idea of the Plane of Dreams is to go there, you have to fall asleep, and then you can enter the Plane of Dreams, which is a crazy, ethereal dream world. And this is our truly free sandbox where we can just do whatever we want, and we love that.
Yeah, I've played around in that sandbox. I think more. Have you actually done a Dreams one yet?
I have not.
One of these days, I want to see what you do in the Plane of Dreams.
It's gonna be bad.
Well, I mean, I guess I know.
No. I mean, sorry, bad for the players. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my god, I love the Plane of Dreams so much.
Plane of Dreams, Pete. Don't you?
Yeah,
don't you lie to our friends?
I didn't want to
lie to our audience.
Well, I didn't want to say that I didn't know what you were doing in the Plane of Dreams. Anyway, one of the kind of things that defines the Plane of Dreams, though, the one kind of buoy in the ocean is the Dreamwalkers, which are a sect of monks that have the ability to kind of shift themselves into the Plane of Dreams. Not a lot known about them and the way their abilities work, but they are run by their master named Som, and their kind of house is located on top of the Slumbering Spine, which is a mountain in D&D time that kind of moves up and down slowly, making it very relaxing to sleep upon. And it's a great place to shift into the Plane of Dreams.
And that's really about it. As you can see, a lot of these last places we've talked about lack kind of as defined themes as some of the first ones. That's also why I visit them less. But over time, we've been developing these places more and more and giving them a lot more flavor to them. We got a new place, actually, I'm visiting this upcoming week by the Sacred Veil. I'm pretty excited for. We'll see how that goes. But before...
I'm excited for it, too.
Before we sign off for the night, let's talk about one more thing in D&D time, and that is what happens if we make a place and we don't want to use it anymore. There are a few places that's happened to, locations throughout the land of D&D time that we've created, we've run some adventures in, and in the end, Pete and I just felt like we weren't getting it, we weren't feeling it. One such place is Crandall McDargus's farm. For those of you who've been here a long time.
Yeah, if you were back in the OG.
Crandall McDargus was a disgruntled Hill Dwarf farmer who grew gigantic plants that would be alive and do weird shit. It was funky. It was always a weird adventure.
I loved it, honestly.
A little too weird, I think, for D&D time. Some people got, the necromancer. I don't remember what we called him. The necromancer of Corn.
I know there was the tomato god.
Every single one of his adventures revolved around one of his prized cows being stolen, and then the cow was actually the villain the whole time. It was a very obvious gimmick that, I don't know, I really enjoyed it, but it was just
Jeremy, you did one where the cow wasn't the villain, and then I was like...
I screwed that one up. I messed up.
Yeah. Another great example is the moon. Originally, the moon was populated entirely by little tiny people. It was just tiny humans on the moon that you could what they're like an inch tall, basically, or not even that tall. They were smaller than that, and they had like a whole city, and the moon was heavily populated. And I made that, and I was like, man, that's kind of stupid, and there's not really anything to do with it other than the one kind of like gimmick adventure. Like, I didn't even really use it that well in the original adventure that I made for it. It was just kind of like what happened to be on the moon. And so what we ended up doing is completely annihilating it in a later adventure that Jeremy
killed
ran.
all of the moon men.
I was like, Jeremy, destroy the moon. So yeah, a few adventurers wiped all the moons, and then we eventually put Lemek on the moon. But yeah, the little moon men are pretty much dead.
For those of you unaware, Lemek was our villain for our Halloween adventure, which we ran last year. Pete and I have kind of decided that every Halloween we're going to run a special series of adventures. They go all throughout October, so each week is another series of related one-shot adventures, all culminating in our Halloween finale. And I think Halloween is kind of our time to look at all these places in DnDTime and say, like, do we really still need this place? Nah, and just get rid of it. That's what we did with the moon, and I really liked that.
Central City is done. That's it.
I don't think Central City's ever going to go away. I like Central City.
No, I was just joking.
And I
think Central City would mess up the most stuff if we destroyed it.
Oh yeah, that would be rough. Well, I don't know, maybe. Anyway, yeah, basically there's a whole bunch of crazy stuff in DnDTime. We didn't give anything nearly enough time, I don't think, but there's way more. I mean, Pete and I could talk forever about the
like we did the Plane of Dreams last, but I have so much to say about the Plane of Dreams that we're like not gonna have time for.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess that just means we're going to have to come back at some point, maybe have an episode just about the Plane of Dreams.
Oh my God, that would be that might be a little bit too much.
Really cool. I don't know. Well, okay, maybe the Plane of Dreams would be hard, but anywho.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's it, right?
Yeah, we gotta end this at some point, and I think we're hitting that border now. So thank you, everyone who's come by to hang out. We love each and every one. I'm sorry.
That is true.
You broke up you distracted me, Card Pocket, with your goodbye, Moon Man. Oh, no. Anyway, thank you, everyone,
Jermaine
for
is a
hanging
funny
out.
dude. Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. We mentioned it earlier, but we got other streams Friday, Sunday, same time, Pete and Jeremy's DnDTime. If you learned about all these stupid places and want to play in those places and don't already, come play in Pete and Jeremy's DnDTime on Friday, and you could see any one of these ridiculous locations yourself.
Except, two of them are showing up this week, and then the Marinade.
Actually, that's true.
The people and the Sacred Rail. But besides that, what's the third? It could be a mystery. Who knows?
I don't yet.
Also, as a quick note, just so that everyone's aware, Sunday we are going to be running another DnDTime Brews stream, where we are either going to finish up the Green Sun Warlock, or maybe we'll start on something new. I think we'll see. Maybe we'll throw out some polls or something during DnDTime on Friday and see what people want to see. Yeah, we'll check it out. We'll figure it out. And then I'm not going to be running a casual stream this Saturday. Too much stuff going on. So hopefully that'll be happening a little bit more.
Maybe bunny people soon. There's been a lot of talk about bunny people as the thing. We didn't.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about bunny people. You're really pushing the space druid. Oh, the death druid. I like this, Mac.
Death druid. Dream monk also is definitely on the list.
We got a lot on the list. It's just a matter of figuring out what people really want to see. So.
Yeah. So I think that's gonna do it for the stream. I guess I'm Pete.
And I'm Jeremy. And this is
DnDTime Talks.
Bye-bye.
I think we did bad on that.